Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about the new Steven Spielberg film, The Post. Um, this is my review for it. This is my opinion of the film. And as usual, I'll provide a synopsis and all that kind of stuff too. In this movie, The Post, you guys, it centers around a time around the Richard Nixon presidency era where a group of journalists who work for the Washington Post. They get a hold of what is supposedly the Pentagon Papers. These papers have a lot of government secrets on them. They have a lot of things that really happened and went down during the Vietnam War. Um, some things that people who were working for the government were trying to keep away from the general public, things that they didn't want them to know. So the Washington Post, they kind of view this as their opportunity to have this really big story to really let people know that things that were happening in Vietnam were not exactly what they thought they were. So this big newspaper article would reveal, tons of things that were going on in these papers, why they were being kept secret from people. Basically, this article would have let people know what's really going on with the government and what really happened in Vietnam and stuff like that. They even find insiders who were at Vietnam and knew a lot about this stuff and things that even they knew were wrong with the Vietnam War and stuff like that. And this also happened roughly around the time where the Watergate scandal was going down. So Richard Nixon was under a lot of investigation. He really didn't want a lot of people to know about stuff that was going on with him. And there was a lot of secrets obviously going on with him at that time too. So he wanted basically anything that would have ratted him out even sooner. He didn't want out there at all in the general public. It turns out the New York Times tried to post a story about this earlier than the Washington Post. They somehow got a hold of these documents too, and they actually got completely shut down. They were not able to publish anything further newspapers for the longest time because of the fact that the government and Richard Nixon, who was the president at the time, did not want anybody to know about anything that was going on in these Pentagon Papers. So the Washington Post later gets at a crossroads. They have to decide they publish, but they run the risk of getting shut down like the New York Times. Or they publish it, they become the heroes. They really let the general public know exactly what was going on in these Pentagon Papers, and hopefully some other newspaper sources will follow them. So that's the hope anyway. So this movie's all about freedom of speech, freedom of the press. If you know about something that's going on with the government, do you have to report it? Should it be reported? Do people really need to know? Should they know? Can they know? So this film addresses all these things over the course of the movie, The Post. So overall, guys, I enjoyed this film. It's not one of Steven Spielberg's better films. I think the films that we are always going to remember him for are films like Jaws and E.T. and Schindler's List and Jurassic Park and the really, really big ones that he's worked on over the course of the years. I don't think The Post is going to end up being one of those big Spielberg films, even though it's nominated for Oscars right now and stuff like that. Um, there's certainly things I like about this film. There's certainly things about it that definitely reflect that Steven Spielberg was a part of this production. There's just certain things about it when I go through my negatives of the movie that really kind of drag this film down a little bit. But there's certainly things about it that I really like. And if you're a huge Steven Spielberg fan like I am, you're probably going to really enjoy a lot of the stuff that's covered in this movie. So for my positive of the post, um, I like how it's a journalism story about journalists. That's something that the movie Spotlight did, that won Best Picture a couple years ago. I thought failed to do. I thought Spotlight was too much about the subject matter they were covering in their paper, and it really wasn't about the journalists. I like how the Post is kind of different. It's more about the journalists. It's more about their experience of kind of finding out about these Pentagon Papers and kind of how they had to keep things under wraps until they really decided if they could post this thing in their paper or not. And the hardships about this, what exactly happens to them in public now if they do go through with this and stuff like that. So I really like how it's a journalism story about the journalists too. It wasn't just about revealing about these government secrets and revealing about these documents. It really was about the struggles that these journalists faced and how to simplify the information and the hardships that come with posting something like this, and if the government comes after you about this and stuff like that. So this film really focuses on that idea. I also like how the post is very much about displaying the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. How it's important that if you know something that's really happening out in the world, that it's important that the general public knows about it, not to hide it from people, not to hide it away. So I like how this film really much is about freedom of speech, freedom of the press. If you know about something really bad happening, should the general public know, and all that kind of stuff. So I like how The Post is very much a film about those things. And this is kind of where Steven Spielberg kind of steps into this movie a little bit, and where I really enjoyed the better parts of this movie. And I think that's the espionage elements, the elements of the film where people who really knew about these things happening, who really knew about these Pentagon Papers being around, and kind of were the very few people outside of the general public that knew about this stuff. I like these espionage elements of people who, tried to scan the Pentagon Papers and kept this secret for a while, and were a part of the Vietnam War, and just those. So for those who see the film, you probably know what I'm talking about already. I like these espionage elements of people who really knew that was happening, and were tracking down the right people and the right journalists to get this information across the people. I like these elements of this movie a lot. I also like this film's modern and historical relevance to the press now. It's still kind of relevant now that there's a lot of things that the government and the president doesn't want us to know about what's going on in the world right now, and how there's things that have to be pulled from the press and stuff like that. So even though this is a film about something that happened in history, the film also makes the point that this is kind of something that's still kind of happening now. And if you really want to have freedom of speech and freedom of the press, that's really up to the press. That's really not up to the government or the president or anything like that. If something's really happening in the world, it's a journalist's job to really make sure that the general public knows about it. So I like how this film makes this relevant point that if these journalists really want to let people know what's going on, you have to let them post stuff about this. If you can't, you're not letting them do their job, and they can't do their job if they can't publish anything about what's going on in the world. So that's what journalism is, and so this film makes this point about that. And this won't shock anybody just because of the performers alone. Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, tons of A-list cast members are in this movie. Great performances all around. So like I said, really a compliment that really comes with a movie like this. It's a Steven Spielberg film. It's about a historical time, a significant historical time that is related to something going on now. Of course, the performances are going to be great. You got Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, David Cross, Alison Brie. Tons of great talent in this movie. So huge thumbs up to all the talent in this film. It really is an A-list cast that they assembled for this movie. For my negatives of The Post, I thought the second act was really slow in this movie. It's a very slow-paced act, and that's really too bad because I thought Act 1 was paced perfectly, Act 3 was paced perfectly. There's something about the middle act in this film that just really is a little too slow for its own good. And then that goes to my other point in this film. I think certain scenes feel rushed in this movie. There's just certain scenes in this movie, whether they're showing something that happened in Vietnam War, or there's like some brief moments where they're showing kind of what's happening in Richard Nixon's White House rooms and stuff like that. There's certain scenes that really feel rushed in this film. They really don't feel completed. They feel like they're kind of something out of a rough cut of this movie and not the finalized cut. So certain scenes feel kind of rushed in this movie, and that's really too bad. And I know this film, was quickly tracked. I think Steven Spielberg had to quickly make this while also making Ready Player One coming out pretty soon. So that's really kind of showing in this movie that the fact that another film production was going on while this film was being made. And as a result, certain scenes feel rushed in this movie. I also didn't like how Meryl Streep's character felt like she was at home all the time. And for why I don't like that is because this film is really much about how her character and Tom Hanks's character were really much involved with, do we post this, do we not, in our paper? And it felt like for a film where it's like, these people were really, really involved with their paper. One of them is kind of home all the time and hosting parties all the time and just kind of giving a quick answer on the phone about, oh yeah, do this. Oh yeah, don't do this. For me personally, I thought Meryl Streep's character was kind of uninteresting in that sense because, even though she's a big part of this paper, she's really just kind of the person that stays at home. Occasionally gets a phone call of, should we do this, should we not do this? And she hosts parties for the rest of the movie. So I thought her character in that aspect was kind of lame in this movie. She's at this press and this paper, obviously, but I thought for being a film where these journalists are kind of giving their lives to making sure that this paper's running correctly, I thought that aspect of her character was kind of lame, how she was at home all the time. There's also really no end credit explanation as to where exactly happened to these journalists after this article got posted. Obviously, it's safe to say that good and bad things happened that with that happening. But unfortunately, with a lot of film biopics, the director or whoever's making the movie is going to have some type of explanation of, so and so happened to this person, so and so happened to this person, and this benefited their career, this hurt their career, and stuff like that. So, unfortunately, once the film's over with, it's over with. There's no end credit explanation of any kind, unfortunately. So, that was a bit of a bummer to me. I really would have liked to have heard what happened to some of these journalists after this event. I also really do feel like this isn't Steven Spielberg's best film. So unfortunately, it is nominated for Oscars. It's getting treatment like it's one of his best films. I personally think he's made a lot better films than this, a lot better paced films than this, and definitely films that don't feel as rushed as this film did. So overall, I'm going to give The Post an 8 out of 10. There's tons of things I really like about it. There's just tons of things about it I don't really care for too much. So I moderately recommend this movie. If you like Steven Spielberg films, if you're interested in hearing more about this journalism event that happened during these Pentagon Papers and during Richard Nixon presidency, I think it's worth checking out. 8 out of 10 for me. I moderately recommend this movie.